now that we've sprayed our primer, we're going to go ahead and flush out the primer and switch over to our top coat paint. So we're going to empty out the paint from lines. Then we're going to flush it with some clean water. We'll mix up the paint, and then we're going to fill the primer. Okay. To flush, you can turn off your atomizing air, because once again, you'll only need this nozzle when you want to actually spray. We don't need to atomize right now. Keep your air inlet turned on though. You can also take the tip off. This tip here in the nozzle, we really only use, again, when we're spraying, when we need to atomize. Right now, we're just trying to drain the lines. So you keep the top, set it off to the side. Just like during setup, I'm going to pick up the siphon tube, empty all the paint out, and then I will flush it with water. Now that all the primer is empty, we're going to flush with clean water, and I'm just going to flush it right into the spit bucket, and then we'll leave it. Okay, so the process was done in reverse. We emptied all the primer, we flushed it. Now it's just going to sit in water until you're ready for paint. Let's mix up our paint. For paint, I'm just using some leftover salmon color. We're going to be switching over to Sailor. I'm not sure if that's what we're going to continue to use. But for now, we'll just use some leftover Royal paint. Open up the can. The shelf life, by the way, on the Royal anyway, is 1 year. I have no idea what it is with Sailor if we switch over to that. But this is maybe 1.5 years old. Should be okay though. When you open it up, it'll look kind of yucky. We're just going to stir with that paddle until you get a smooth, consistent color and you're not seeing any lines of pigmentation. Again, make sure your drill is on the slow setting so that we don't make too many bubbles. That will show up in your paint. I'm going to finish mixing. I will unpause when I'm done. Okay, the paint is mixed. We've got our hose and water. Just like we did with the primer, it's the exact same process. Just going to switch the pickup tube to the pink paint. Going to spray it into the spit bucket until you see that it's turned completely pink paint and there's no more water in the lines. Then you know you're good to go. Okay, now we know we're all set. Ready to go. Paint is in the lines. This tip here is filled with the white primer still. You can see it's kind of white. So what I'll do is I'll just give it a quick rinse off. I've got the 411 tip in here, which 411 can be used for paint or primer. So I'll just give it a quick rinse off, a quick brush, and then I'll put it back on as long as it's nice and clean. So I'll take the O-ring out, the little white O-ring, rinse it off in some water. Nice and clean. Use a rag, use a brush, whatever you need. Make sure there's no more white primer in there. Clean it all out. Okay, it should be okay. I can see daylight through my mold. I know I'm ready to go. Put my O-ring back in. O-ring back in the tip, just like during setup. Going to put it back into the red cap. It'll snap into place. Back into the black ring, and stick it back on the gun. Ready for painting. Okay. Now I'm going to scuff this. So I think I'm going to do a separate video. Yeah, I'll do a separate video. So my primed piece is nice and ready. It's really dry. The primer takes maybe, I don't know, 20 minutes to dry till it's sandable. Typically we do 2 coats of primer back to back. So what that means is we'll prime something, let it tack up for maybe 10-ish minutes, even 20, even if it's dry. And then we'll put another coat of primer right on top of it. So the primer is really nice and thick and it builds up quite a bit. And then after both coats of primer are done, we will sand. So I'm going to turn off the lights in a minute, but we use, I guess, this indirect light that shines across the piece. With the light turned off, you can really see every single flaw. The goal of this scuff sanding is to make the surface as smooth as possible. So that way, when you put your top coat on top of it, there aren't any flaws, any bumps. Now's the time to fill any sort of nail holes or imperfections in the wood. Now you want to use your filler, as well as if there are any bumps, you're going to want to make sure that you get that down. This is a flat piece. It's not a cabinet door or anything. So sanding is going to be pretty easy. We have our Surf Prep scuff sander. I'm just going to use a hand sanding pad. But scuffing is by far the most important part of painting. It is also the most grueling, I guess. It's a bit of a grind. It takes a while, but the more effort and time that you put into scuffing, the better your work will be, even though it's annoying. It's really important, and it's perhaps the most important part if you want a good final product. So I'll turn the light off and I'll bring the computer over there so that way you can see what I'm talking about with all the flaws. Okay. Hopefully we'll be able to see. So when you're looking at the light shining across the surface here, you can see every flaw. You can see how much dust is on here, pits and valleys. This is from our wet mill gauge from earlier. So this light, this indirect light, is really, really important as you're sanding. just to let you know, what sort of imperfections are you going to see. Whatever you see in this stage here is what you're going to see in the top coat. The top coat hides nothing. So if it looks perfect here under this light, it'll look perfect in your finish. I also like to wear gloves during this part. The paint dust can really stay on your fingers, and it can stay on your skin and then get on your steering wheel and it'll get everywhere. So gloves if you have them. Like I said, anything you've had, we also have the zip prep standard. You'll want a nice smooth finish. We're not using a rough grit here. Zip prep has different grit names. This is a fine pad. I typically do fine, and then I'll finish with a very fine, just to make it as smooth as possible. So one important thing is that you want to make sure you don't sand too aggressively, that you see raw wood. If you see raw wood, that means you have to go back and prime it because the surface will not look the same once you paint it. So it's really important to make sure that every surface of piece you're painting has a primer on it and then has been sanded rather. Again, I'm just kind of going a little bit faster here for demonstration purposes. The dust should be powdery like this. If you go to sand the primer and it gets gloopy or it kind of clumps up and it does not powder, that's how you know it's not ready to be sanded. But it should definitely be powdered. Again, wear a mask. That stuff's not good for you. Okay, it's just about sanded well enough for this video, so I'm gonna turn the lights back on and we should get to painting. Yeah. The technique for painting will be the same as before. I'll blow off all the dust from our sanding, but exact same technique. You're gonna box coat it 6 to 12 inches above the surface, 90-degree angle, 50% overlap, box coat, 4 to 6 wet mills still. You can make one. Like a big of. Great. Turn the fan on. I forgot to turn the atomizing air on. That's why you can see it's one giant glob. Make sure to turn that atomizing air knob on. That's it. For the timing on spraying, how fast or how slow should you go? That's something that you'll get the hang of with practice. The most important thing is just the coverage, the 4 to 6 wet mils that you can measure with the wet mil gauge from before. You'll count in your head, sing a song, something. It'll just become a natural rhythm. But that's kind of it. The one important thing, helpful tip that I've learned is that if you keep this tip in a sponge with water or a dish with water or something and keep it moist at all times, it will keep it from clogging. Otherwise, this tip is known to get really clogged and then that can cause issues. You have to take it apart. I'll do a video on troubleshooting, but as much as you can, if you just keep it in that moist little pad there, you should be good to go and probably should be good all day. Oh, how do I stop? Okay.